So in this video, we are going to add a logger to Versetto.word. We're also going to move this core project into a .NET standard now and start preparing this for growth for adding multiple modules, file handling, database handling, settings, theming, all that kind of stuff needs to start having some kind of structure. So we're going to start implementing that and adding more into the IOC. So in order to do that first, this project is currently just a .NET framework class library, which is just only works on Windows. And even though the UI only works on Windows, ultimately this core is going to end up being used on Mac, Linux, Android, iOS, everything. So we want to convert this now to a .NET standard. So pretty easy. You just right click on your solution file, go to Open Folder in Explorer. I'll get you here. So this is a project we want to convert. So I find the simplest way is to simply close down Visual Studio. Then if we rename this folder to 2, just so we've got a new name, open Visual Studio back up, and then we'll make a new project here, and click Create New Project at the bottom, .NET Standard Class Library. And then we just browse and we go to our Versetto Word application in the source folder and select that as the folder, and then give it the same name as the previous one. So Versetto.word.core, and you can leave that create directory for solution checked, I believe. Yeah, because we are going to delete the solution file it creates. So click OK to that. That should make us a .NET Standard class library with one class, which is all fine. And then if we look in the folder, it's gone in here. And in fact, we didn't need the create folder, so you can uncheck that. I'll just close down that solution now. Delete the solution file that it made for the .NET Core. Clicked enter instead of... 1 second, close that. And then go into here, and this is the project we care about. That's the only file we really care about. So we just cut the CS proj, go up, paste it into here for now, delete the old one, rename... delete the one we just created and rename the old one back. So that whole process, all we've really done is made a CS proj file. And I guess if we open that and look at it, you'll see that's all there really is. So you could just open the text editor and paste this in and save a file as .csproj. But we want to make sure this is always the, what the environment creates. So in 6 months from now, you likely won't have that structure. So it might not be a good idea to just do a text edit document unless you're watching this video fairly live. Go into the core folder, delete the old CS proj. Let's clear up some old folders, delete the bin folder, delete the object folder, delete the properties folder. Settings has got nothing in it, delete that if you've got that. I think I just created that folder. Body Weaver will have to re-add anyway, I think, but we'll leave that in there. Packages.config. I think is the old .NET stuff. So yeah, we don't need this file, but we do need to remember to open these. So keep a reference of those open. I'm going to delete the packages file as well. So our solution, guess we can't keep a reference there if it's not open. Let's chuck this into Notepad. First, let me just paste the CS proj file into here, the .NET Core, the .NET Standard one we just made. Keep a reference of these in Notepad, so we can reinstall them, and then delete the packages.config. And now that's really going to have converted the whole project to a .NET Core project, and our solution file will still reference it because it's the same name in the same place. So without having to do any major amount of work there, this should have now already converted our core project to a .NET Standard project. The only step left really is to re-add these, the body, the ninject, the property change, and the JSON. So you can see it's already found the project. Right click, manage NuGet packages. And then JSON we want, so that's already top of the list. Install that and accept. Then we wanted body, so we'll install that. You have to install body, you don't have to, but install body first, then install body.property changed. Otherwise, the has this been renamed? No, I just typed the wrong thing. Property change.foddy. So if you add this 1 second, otherwise the foddy will override this file sometimes, and that's where people get issues. If it does, once you've installed foddy and foddy.property changed, you can just make sure the file has property changed in the document. Otherwise, it won't. All your UI updating won't work. And then the last thing is ninject. And with those in, we should have now converted the project to a .NET Standard class library, if you will. So that means now that this technical amount of code in here should be usable on every platform. Uses ninject. So we've just installed a higher version of ninject in this project, and the Facetto Word needs updating. So right click on your Facetto Word, manage NuGet packages. Let's just update everything. So select all, update. Which you should really probably do this every now and then to keep your packages up to date. If you get this warning that already exists, don't override. This is what I'm talking about with this foddy weaver file. It's trying to update foddy, and foddy by default doesn't have the property changed in. So this will simply remove the property change. So click no to any question about overriding your foddy weavers file. So that's all updated. Fairly painless, in fact massively painless compared to what you used to have to do. Now we have a .NET, we right click on the core and click properties. You'll see now we're a .NET Standard library, not a .NET framework. So we just make sure our application still works, and it should just function all the same. So there's the application, click stuff, go to the login screen. So all seems to be working. Very basic test, but pretty sure that's okay. So like I said, the benefit of this project now is that it's .NET Core. So as we come to migrate this, we can have this running on every other platform. So we want to move as much stuff into the core as we can, so that this project is purely Windows only UI stuff, which we've done for the most part already. We've kind of kept that separation. So the styles, the pages, the IOC is simply an implementation of the UI manager for this UI. Images, fonts, dialogues. I think nearly everything in here anyway is very specific to WPF, because that's the point of why we did it anyway. So there's nothing really, I don't think, to move. But just bear in mind that you want to keep as much in this core as possible, and only the WPF specific stuff in the Word project. So with that migrated, we'll move on to logging. So by logging, I mean in your application you want to do something, and you want to do, say, log, or say logger.log something, and you expect this to go to several places. So if you're debugging, you probably want that to go to a kind of debug output in like here. So these are all debug messages, if you will. You want to see your own debug messages for your sanity and your development process, makes it easier. You might want to, if you're on a website, have it log into a trace as opposed a debug output. You want to log to a file if you want to keep like a constant log of your application. Say the application crashes and you're like, let's go and find out what went wrong, and it's in production and you're not debugging. Or you were debugging and you simply didn't have exceptions turned on, so it crashed and you weren't aware. You'd expect your kind of log that you write everywhere to give you some information about that. So the logging is literally as it sounds. It's to log information. It's to use how you wish in your application, where you wish. There's no rights or wrongs. It's about creating information that you need or that's helpful. So to do that, there are built-in things in .NET Core. There's built-in things in the .NET frameworks. There's third-party packages that, again, you know me, I like to just make things. Logging isn't that hard, and we're going to get it done in probably an hour, so we're just going to make our own. Again, some people might say, well, why are you bothering to make your own? I'll kind of say, well, why not when it's only an hour? Why rely on something else and not have any access to source code when you can just make your own? I certainly am all about making use of existing technology and not repeating yourself. But not going to the point where every little task in your solution is, oh, I need logging, I'll add this package. Oh, I need to write an image, or I'll make this package. Or I need to resize an image, I'll add this other package. And soon you end up with your dependencies list of things you rely on grows huge. And then say .NET changes, or this company goes out of business and they delete all the source code, or it simply becomes incompatible or there's a bug. If it's not your code, you've got no control over that. So if you have a project with 50, 60 dependencies, your chances of a failure or a bug out of your control are exponentially larger. So certainly make use of packages when it saves a hell of a lot of time. But when it's talking about saving an hour's worth of time, honestly, don't bother. Plus, you'll learn how to do that task instead of wondering, well, how do I write a log? I usually use this package and this does it for me. Well, that's not knowledge, is it? That's just making use of packages. So as a developer, I always crave the knowledge. I'm not into development I just want to get the end product. I want to understand the process along the way. And hopefully people watching this video have got a similar thought pattern, that you're here to learn. You're not here to watch me install a logging package manager. So basically, let's just get right into it. It shouldn't be too hard. So we've got IOC, and the point of this IOC is it's called inversion of control or dependency injection. And as this project grows, you'll have a lot of things where we're trying to separate the concern of things, if you will. So one of these things now would be logging. And ultimately, as the project grew, you'd probably have a complete separate project for Facetto.log or Facetto.logging that handles nothing but logging and has no idea about anything else in the project, no other projects or anything. And that's where this dependency injection comes in. Similar to this UI manager. This UI manager is self-contained and knows nothing about the UI itself, nor does anything consuming this interface have any idea what the UI is. But it does know that it wants the UI to show a message, and this is the info. And then in the WPF application, we implement a UI manager that basically shows a dialog message for us. So it keeps the separation of concerns very clean and everything in kind of modules. But again, you'll see this being more beneficial as it grows. The bottom line is if we make an interface now for the logger, then we implement the logger, we make an actual solid concrete class like this UI manager is. That's the concrete class, the implementation. And this is the interface. So at any point in time, our application could dump the logger that we implemented and make a new one. And the implications of that are none of the rest of the project will get in any way affected, if you will. So if the logger failed, or we remove the logger completely and replaced it with a blank one that does nothing, the rest of the application will function fine because it was never involved directly. So again, it's a concept that you'll see come together as we get further on. So let's just get into it, and then I'll explain it more at the end of the video. So just right-click in the interfaces class in IOC, and we'll make a new class called LogFactory. This factory is going to be, as the name kind of suggests, it's a factory. It's going to churn out loggers, if you will. It's going to keep hold of all the workers. So you're going to have multiple loggers. And you're going to have one that's, like we say, logs to the debug, logs to a file, logs to a trace, maybe even logs live directly to a website. But all of those loggers in themselves need to be grouped together so that your application can simply say, just log me a message. It doesn't care about the underlying loggers that go to all these different places. So the log factory is kind of a place where you add all these different loggers to it. So holds a bunch of loggers to log messages for the user. And in this interface, we will have some events. So our application or our consumer would want to, say, be aware of a new log. So we haven't made this yet, but we'll call it LogFactory level. So make a new event here, and we'll call it new log. So fires whenever a new log arrives. So this is kind of for anyone that wants to hook in to our logger and simply be aware of when a log arrives. Maybe you want to pop something up in the UI independently, or whatever you want. You want to be able to be aware of when there's a log for any reason. So the first one, the string, will be the message itself, the actual log message, and this will be the level. So the log level, if we just make a new folder in core, because for now we're not separating this into a whole new project just for the logging, we're keeping it all in core, and we can separate it out as it grows. And we can call this We call it LogFactory level. And the reason we have the LogFactory level and the log in here in its own folder, but the drag and drop thing is really annoying. You move it 1 pixel and it drops. The reason this LogFactory is in here is because this is the interface that the IOC needs to, this is what Logger ultimately needs to implement. And this is the implementation. So LogFactory level is going to be just an enum. So this will be a public enum LogFactory level. The severity of the, that's how you spell severity, yeah, of the log message. And in here you'd have, what are all the log levels? We'll have, I know there's a list we can find somewhere. We've got debug, it's in tools, we're basically following, where are we? Debugging, environment, general, no, projects and solutions. I will find it in a minute. So many options, build and run, there we go. So we're kind of mimicking this, where you got quiet, which I call verbose, well, quiet's practically say nothing. We don't ever want to say nothing, that's pointless. So you got diagnostic, which I'd call verbose, which we could call diagnostic, but I'll call it verbose. It just means, excessive detail. Then you got detailed, which I'd call probably informative, maybe. So it's up to us. We can follow this exactly, but all it means is the more detailed, the further you go down this list to here, you log like more detail and effectively less important detail. So debug I'd call, like logs absolutely everything. So logs everything. That's kind of when you're debugging a problem. You're trying to find a problem. How much information do you want to be given? So this is like, give me everything sort of thing. Stepping up from that, I'd say we have verbose, which, as I mentioned, is, log a lot of information. So log all information except debug information. So that's like really, really low level stuff. Then we'll step up one, probably have informative. So logs all informative messages, ignoring any debug and verbose messages. Step up again, we'd probably have you could have normal, I guess. Logs only, warnings, errors, and warnings, errors, and standard messages. And then critical. And again, this is up to you. I'm just making this list up as I go. You can make any kind of level. The key here is to make the code work easier. Because it's an integer, you can simply then say less than. You could say if you logged an informative message and we wanted to output a verbose message or above, our code just has to say if the message's value, say this one, or rather if the message was that, message's value 3 is greater than the log level or greater than or equal to, then log it. So if you put your most detailed output first and work your way up to, practically outputting nothing, then, that's how it works. The names are up to you, whatever works for you. So the critical, log only, critical errors and warnings, no information, or no general information. And then we could add a last one, which is nothing, I guess. The logger will never output anything. So there's my list. And I think that's, again, there's nothing special about this other than I've simply made the most noisy log the lowest number and worked my way up. You can call these, like, say, whatever you want. So there's my log level. We've got an event that's going to output, fire whenever we get a log. So that's that. Then right back to properties now. And for this, we will want so the log output level, and let's get set, isn't it? This will be what we were talking about. If you pull in your LogFactory and you set up how much information do I want to log, this is the way you set it. So you set this to informative, only informative messages and below will get logged out. The level of logging to output. What else do we need? We will have no, it's not property, well, a method. So as I mentioned, this is a factory to log to certain loggers. So we want a way to add logger, and then we will need an iLogger, which we'll have to make as well. Adds the specific logger to this factory. The logger, which is not very informative, but it is what it is, the logger. We will make the logger in a minute. As well as adding the log, we'll need to remove the log. Removes the specified logger from this factory. Function-wise, I think that's it for the functions. Now, when we do come to, in fact, no, there isn't, obviously, there's the main one. We need to be able to log a message. So, when we log a message, we'll have the message itself, we'll have the LogFactory level, which we can also default we'll default to probably, I don't really know if I've got, yeah, informative, detailed, critical's the wrong, oh no, that's in order, yeah. Informative, normal. Probably have just normal as the, no, let's have informative as the standard. Just, I think that's about right in the middle. Then that's all you really need to log a message. But I'm also going to have a source of where the log message was coming from, which will default to a blank string. We'll have the file path of, this is all kind of debug information. So say we logged a message from Versetto.word in the UI manager and in the show message. We kind of just want to be able to write logger.log something. And from that, it knows that it's come from the UI manager in Versetto.word in the show message function at line 20. So you kind of want to, you can gather that information automatically. So we can do that. So we'll add the information we expect, which is the origin, the source of where it come from, the file path, and the line number, which is int. And we'll default them all so they don't need to be provided. But then you'll find out in a minute when we make a log, we implement this, they'll get pulled in automatically anyway. So that means we can log the message. Logs the specific message to all loggers in this factory. Then the message to log. The level of the message being logged. The method function this message was logged in. The code file name that this message was logged from, and the line of code in the file name this message was logged from. So I think that's our interface mostly done. The other thing we might want to do is, no, I think that's it for now. That'll do. We can always come back and add. So we've got the LogFactory. Let's now make a logger because we need to be able to, now here we can, again, when this splits up into multiple projects, we'd have the implementation of this and the definition. So it's easy enough to separate when we do move out. So now we can chuck the interface in here directly, or in fact, if we chuck it into IOC, because then the IOC, well, it's not really IOC because it's no, leave it in here for now. Again, we can juggle this around as the project grows, but basically this would be a core interface. This wouldn't go into the logger project, if you will, but we're chucking it in this folder just for now because it's also not an IOC directly. You don't inject a logger into the IOC. You inject a factory, which then consumes loggers. So kind of that's details that you don't really need to worry about right now. That's just I'm trying to think too far ahead when the project isn't that big yet. I've just simply got that experience and I know ultimately where this would end up. So ignore my kind of just babbling on about the location of this file for now and just place it there. So a logger that will output or handle log messages from a LogFactory. So each logger, I guess, will have just really the log message is all it really is bothered about. So this will have just a log, and it will have the message to be logged and the LogFactory level to be logged at. And that's all this needs to know about, because the message will contain all the details about the position and what have you. That's not for the logger to be concerned about. The LogFactory will handle, where the origin and things were and combine it into a message containing that information. So handles the logged message being passed in. And we could also have each logger being independently aware of what it wants to log to kind of ignore, but for now we won't. Like, say the overall factory said that it wants to log only informative messages, but we add like a debug logger, and the debug logger wants to always log them regardless. Like basically be almost a rogue and simply ignore the setting. We could add that, but again, for now, we just keep it simple. So the message being logged, the level of the log message, and that's all the logger will need to implement. So now we've got this interface for a LogFactory, and we want to now make a concrete implementation. So we will add another class, and this will be called, we'll just call this base LogFactory. We can just, you can make multiple factories, like say you can implement them in any way. Because this is kind of a standard one we're just going to use for our application, we'll just call it base. The standard LogFactory for Versato Word. Logs details to the debug, console, trace, and log files. Then you can just click on LogFactory control dot and enter to implement all the goodness. This is a property, public properties, get rid of the and then even though the interface has got the comments, so you shouldn't technically need to move them over. I always move them over as well. The reason for that is when we come to automatically generate our developer documentation from these comments, it's right there when people are looking at the base LogFactory document instead of having to go into the interface as well. So we have the log output level, then we have public events, we'll do the same again. We'll go to events. In fact, these are back to front for my way of doing things. Properties first, then events. That's the new log event. In this case, we will instantate it automatically. Message level. And that's so that we can hook into it. We don't have to worry about initialization or locking this if we simply make a default one in the first place. That allows us to just do new log plus equals without worrying about anything else. The add log, get the comment from again. And the remove, might as well chuck all these comments in for now before we implement the functions. My mouse has died. This keeps happening lately. My mouse likes to die. I have to turn it off and on. Come on, there we go. And remove log. Right, so we have all the comments from the LogFactory, so we can close that. Close all these other windows for now. Come on, close. There we go. So the add logger, we will need then, in that case, we need to also keep, we'll do protected methods in case somebody wants to override this logger and, you know, improve on it. So we'll have a protected list of iLoggers. And this will be, we'll just call it loggers. Make a new list. We will also want to lock that list when we add things to it. So we will do a protected object loggers lock. So it's just simply an object to lock to. So we can only add to the list while, you know, one thing at a time. So we can't end up with the same logger in twice or any kind of checks going on. A lock for the logger list to keep it thread safe. And then now the add logger just needs to lock the list by getting hold of the object we made, just a standard object. Lock the list so it is thread safe. And simply do mloggers.add and just add it to the list. We could do a check there for if the logger is in the list, you know, already, then don't add it. So we could do if mloggers.contains logger and then just logger and just invert that logic. So if it doesn't contain it, then add it. And then for the remove, it's basically a copy and paste for that. Where's the remove? Oh, move them all the way around because the functions are not in the same order. And so add to the log, remove from the log is the same, except now if the logger is in the list. So now if it does contain it, then remove it. So that will add and remove any logger we want to add to the list. Again, nice and simple. It's simply a list that we've locked to keep thread safe, and you can now say add and remove. So we'd simply make a new implementation of, or a new instance of the base LogFactory, add it to our IOC, and then we just call IOC.get iLogFactory.addLogger to add any loggers we want. By default, we'll have this base factory logger adding, you know, specific loggers anyway, and but then it's always available for, you know, our application to add and remove loggers as it sees fit. We could actually leave this base logger factory so it doesn't log anywhere by default other than to, say, the console, like that. Logs details of the console by default, and then just leave the comment like that, and then the user's free to add other ones. So our application could simply add more loggers. So that's what we'll do. We'll make this one just add console, and then we can add other loggers manually in the application. So we've got the add remove. Now finally we're down to the guts of the operation. This is where we actually want to log the message itself. So to do that, we mentioned we've got this message, the level, so we can, when it gets long with a lot of things, you can dump them on new lines like this to keep it a bit easier to see. So the user doesn't have to pass these in. There are special C# 7, I believe, attributes here called caller, I think, member name. If you press Control and Dot, you can see that it says using system runtime compiler services. That will now, by having this attribute before the value, mean that automatically the value comes in as a caller member name. So where we call this from. So you'll see this in use. I won't explain much more until we simply use it, and then you'll see what happens there. Now you can see we'll have caller file path and caller line number. So don't worry about these. I'll show you these in operation when we finish this, and you'll see what this does. So we have that info. Now we want to basically send that log message to each logger. So all we'd have to do is do mloggers.forEach logger.log, and it will be the message and the level. The only difference we want here, log to all loggers, but first we want to do something with this piece of information. So this is where we say, do we want to tag this to the message? Do you want that information in each message? And I guess if so, how do you want it to appear? What style would you like it to be in? Or we can just have we can just keep it simple for now and add it automatically, so that we have that info. It's really, it's up to you what you want. So I think at minimum we'll just chuck in a boolean. So include log origin details, and this will, if true, includes the origin of where the log message was logged from, such as the class name, line number, and file name. And then bear in mind that also needs to be chucked into the interface. It's not just in the base LogFactory, it's for any LogFactory we make. Get rid of the public. So now we could, in this one as well, say set it to true in our base LogFactory. And then what you can do here, if the user wants to know where the log originated from, so if log include log origin details, then I don't need 2 lines. We can say message equals you want the message somewhere, so you pop it on the message at the start, and we can put, say, -- or put it in brackets. It really doesn't matter. So if we said it's going to come from the origin, which should be like the property name. So the origin should be like, log if we logged it from ourselves, which we wouldn't. So like, say, remove log, just a random name. So it'd be something like remove log. It'd be the function. So you kind of want it almost like that to show that you're in a function. You could have a line, well, you will have a line number. So maybe 15 : no. That line number 15, maybe. Something like that. And then you'd also have the file name. So you'd want, you don't want the full file path, but you'd probably at least want the file name. So this would be like base LogFactory.cs. And I'm just trying to visualize what would look right in terms of this information. So you probably want maybe line 15, or you could have maybe base LogFactory, remove logger, line 15, something like that maybe. Yeah, I think that looks okay. And you could also have that at the start instead of you wanted, and then kind of opening out so it looks like it, or you could even log 2 messages, but or a message with a new line, which actually isn't a bad idea. We might want a message with a new line in there. So that's there, and then below it's the message. So in fact, we'll probably do that. And you can do return new line, or you can do system.environment.new line, like that, to add a new line. So we'll probably have ours doing that and then the message. So then we replace this part here with the origin. Replace the line with the line. And we replace this. Now this is going to be the file path. We want the file name. So for now, until we add an IOC to handle all file stuff for us, we'll just use file.getFileName. Or rather path.getFileName of the file path. And there's no kind of error handling there that this might crash if it's null or things like that. But for now, we'll handle that after. We'll just get this going and then add some kind of wrap around there. So if they want to add that information to the start of the message, we now add it, and then we log it for the logger. And then finally, don't forget, we also want to invoke our event to let people know that we have a new log. So then we do new log dot invoke, and do we have, because we always instantate our log, we don't need to check if it's null. So you just do new log dot invoke. That doesn't look very nice. args1, args2. Okay, so let's change this. This is a C#7 only thing. Put this in parentheses. Call this message level. And this is now a tuple. This is like an in, I don't know what the official name is, I guess, but it's like an inline tuple, which is just two or more items in a list without having to make a class for it. And that'll just give us that benefit of now having a single item here when it gets called, details dot, and then you've got level and message. So you've got a bit more information. And to make it look like a class still, you got a dilemma with tuples because you're defining them so they look like variables, but then you're consuming them so they look like now properties, but with lower case names. So you can either do string message, string level, which is the way I'm going to do it, which looks slightly odd because it looks like you've got a variable in a function with a name, but it isn't, because ultimately then the caller has then got what looks right, the details. So like I say, all this does is when you put it in brackets and you define two things inside, it's almost like making a class. So you can think of this now as a single variable, and that's why we've given it a single name here of details, but inside it contains these two properties. But it's all done kind of on the fly typing without having to make a class for such a simple thing. I don't want to make a class to pass two variables in, but then I also don't want the nasty looking invoke with just saying arg1, arg2. So now you can see it tells us it's expecting message and level, but a single item. So you've got to remake that that on the fly class. And off the top of my head, I think you do that by doing maybe just open another one. Another brackets, message, level. So you kind of, you create it in the same way as you define it in this instance. So you define the tuple by just simply putting brackets around it. And then you also create one by just putting brackets around, as opposed how you'd maybe expect, which is to create like an inline object that way. So that just gives us nicer IntelliSense. You don't need to do that. You can leave it without the, you just basically take the brackets off there, parentheses off there, and you'd have it that way. But these are, a nice use for things like that, where you don't want to have to create a class just for the most basic thing. We'll have to update the LogFactory to match. So our events, just wrap them in there. Message, level. And yep, that's it. Inform listeners. And I think that's it for the LogFactory. So I think this will be fully usable. We haven't made a logger yet. So let's just make a real quick logger. So this will be add class. We'll just call this base inside, and let's move the, not for the base LogFactory though, for the LogFactory levels. So, don't know what to call this. Let's call it core for now. So you've got the base LogFactory in there, you've got the iLogger, and then this is now the implementation here. So add class implementation. So we've got the base LogFactory we've implemented, and now we also want to implement a logger. So we'll do a console logger for now, the simplest type. Well, they're all really simple at this point. You just literally write the, write the message to wherever you want it to go now. So this will implement our iLogger. Control dot to get that. So logs the messages to the console. This log then we can say logs the given message to the system console. A message to log the level of the message. So in order to do that now, you just do console.log, or rather .writeLine. I'll get there in a minute. There we go. And then we write whatever we want, which is the message. So in order to then include the level, we could do a string that includes the level in maybe a little brackets like that. What would also be nice if you have different levels, because you've got all these different values. The longest we've got here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So you've got like 11 characters. So we did like a 13 character string, if you will. So for do that, you can do level.toString, and you can probably do it directly in the toString if I could remember the format for padding, but I can't off the top of my head. So we'll just do pad right, and the total width of 13 with a padding of using a space character. So that will then make sure that whatever message is it, whatever the string of the log level is, that the overall output is 13 characters with the padding on the right being a space. That means if this was debug, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it'd be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So it'd come out like that, which kind of actually doesn't look that good. So what we'd want instead is removing that. You'd want it there so that it lines up. And that's so that when, if the message was then informative, it would be informative and it'd level up. So that if you had a bunch of different log messages, this levels up. So if we did, basically, you'd want to now change that to level. It's going to get a bit more tricky because you don't want the padding there now. You actually want that. You want that dot pad right, and then plus the message at the end. Yeah, so that will now make sure we have spacing on that side. So that will include the log level. So write message to console. So we have a console logger. We have a base log factory, and by default we said we wanted this to add that base log factory. So we need to group the public methods into a function. So into a region rather. Public methods. And then constructor. Default constructor. And then here we'll do add logger. And we will then do new console logger. And that's all we need. So now add the console logger by default. And all we need to do is now consume the base log factory. So in our IOC, we also have, right, so we've got bind view models, which we do. And then we've also got some, I'd say we want to move all the, anywhere we're binding anything right now is in the application level. So bind the UI, bind a logger. So now do I LogFactory to a new base LogFactory. And we can add to the IOC a shortcut, just the same, of I LogFactory. And we'll just do IOC.log or IOC.logger because it is the logger. And that's bound. So now that should be all we need to add some logs. So now in here we could say on startup we could do a log. Now the one thing to bear in mind is obviously you can't log anything until the application's been set up where you've had the logger. So you've got to have, after this point we're safe to log. So now you could say IOC.logger.log, and you could just say application starting up, and this is your entry point into the application starting up. You'll see that you can set the level, which by default is informative, which is fine for now. And then you've got the origin, the file path, the line number. We're not specifying those because we're calling this from OnStartup in app.xaml.cs at line 30. So when this calls log and we go into here, this is the interface, so that won't be the case. It will be the base LogFactory itself. These special attributes then will be pre-filled with the location of where we come from. So if we put a breakpoint on here, run the application and presume all that code works, because I don't think we've built it once yet, but hopefully this will all just simply work. So the application is starting up. So we F11 to step into and click yes. So it's already found the correct base logger from the IOC. It's got the log, it's got our message, and now hopefully origin is still null. Maybe we have to do null on them. So this hasn't filled in. So that might be due to the defaults, which is actually interesting. That should have filled in. I wonder if it's because we've gone from an interface. So let's try to make another method of any just to test this, log2, and let's just copy and paste them. I'm wondering whether it's come from the interface, so it's lost its detail, if you will. So let's just now call log2, which we can't from there because it doesn't have it in the interface. So for now, let's just do base LogFactory, just because we know that's what it is. This is just a quick hack to see if my presumption's right of that not filling in due to it being in the interface, which doesn't have those attributes, which I'm pretty sure it will be. So we might just have to add them to the attribute. So now in here, see, now we've got OnStartup, the file path, the line number. So we should then, in theory, and there's no issue with doing this, is to add these attributes to the underlying interface call, because I don't think there's any reason, not to. In fact, we'll just type them again. So caller member name, because it's just defaults that, the user can override, but by default, that's where we want to presume they come from. So I'm quite happy putting them in there. File paths, so this will be caller file path, and this will be caller line number. So now our original log method, because it implements the same stuff, should now work. So we can revert this back to the IOC.logger.log. And then F11 in. And now hopefully we have the information. So now include log details, we said true. So the message that says application starting up should now get prefixed with all our information. So now our log message looks like this: app.xaml.cs on startup line 30, application starting up. So then when we log that, we do a for each in each logger. This should then go to the console logger, and we should hit this function where we're just told then our logger just simply needs to write that message out. So that should then just write to the console, which if we look at the output here, I think it should show here. So there you go. Now you can see it's logged out here, and it's logged it, nicely, one after the other. The only thing, yeah, that'll always work. As in, so the only thing with logging on a new line is in case something logged in between. But this is one message. This simply has got a breakpoint in it. So you can log it however you like. You might just want to do it in one big line, or you might want to break it up. The only kind of semi-downside there is every single message you write has got 2 lines now. So if you wanted it to just dump onto one line, you could just remove the new line here. And then if we log that this time, get rid of that. You can see it now goes on one line, but you can also see the issue there is, in fact, we lost the prefix, didn't we? Because now you can see it says informative, and then this info, and then in one line. So I think it looks nicer having where have we gone? Not there. I think it definitely looks nicer with the new line. But now I've noticed that informative thing, that prefixes, then also is fixed at the start. So we might want to tweak the output style of this till we like it. So yeah, you got like informative and then that. So I'm not sure whether I like that informative, but the thing is there, that choice is down to the logger that wants to, the console logger in this case, what it's going to do with that info. So we could have, instead of writing out this log message here, prefixing it, which also adds a lot of space when we don't want to, we could write just the message out, but we could color the console. So we could do reset color once we're done, and color console based on level. So you could do switch, level, case, and then for each one, so critical, you could do console dot set. In fact, console color. So make a default value. And let's just make it white by default. Or you could even just get the, you could actually do var console old color equals console.foreground color. Save old color. Then instead of doing reset color, which goes straight back to, the default completely, we reset it to whatever it was before we got called, in case somebody else has also messed with the console color. So we could do the reset that way, save the old value, default log color value for us is going to be white. We switch it based on type, so now the console color is going to be, for critical, we'll have red. Or you could even put that in a default, but we don't care, so that's based on there. Console.foreground color now equals our desired console color. And then write the message. So now we could say critical is red. Then we have debug, which is just, verbose information, we'll make gray. We'll have American spelling. Informative is white, which is default, so we don't need to bother with because we've set the default here. In fact, informative is a bit surplus still, because normal is normal, I guess. Or is it? No, warnings, errors, and standard. Oh yeah, standard messages, I would say. Or, in fact, we have, I get a bit confused between normal and informative. Informative's kind of, a bit more extra information. I also don't like how these aren't in order. We have to look at them here for the order. So you've got debug, which is the most detailed, then verbose. So we should do this in that order so it stacks down. So debug is the most informative. Then we have verbose. So I think these want to be very close. verbose is, you probably want verbose to be grey, to be honest. And debug, which is like developer specific. What do we do? We can try dark grey, but then it might be too hard to read. I'm pretty sure it will be. What would developers usually see? We're used to looking at blue, I guess. This is the colour I probably see the most when I'm writing code. So we'll make developers this kind of blue. And I don't know whether that will be that blue, but we'll leave it at that. So debug is blue. Verbose is grey. Then informative, the next one up, would be white. Normal isn't really a message you can log here. That's the thing. I think we've got one extra here. I don't think we need normal. I think informative is normal. Let's get rid of informative. Sorry, get rid of normal and do that. So that's better. So informative is white, which we don't need to specify because it's standard anyway. Critical. In fact, we need one more anyway. We've got, in fact, we need two more. Because you have critical messages and then you have, yeah, there's a point. We've technically done this slightly wrong, I think. What we want, we've got the LogFactory level, but then we also need the log level itself. As in, if you want to log out informative messages that do, or rather, yeah, informative messages. Let's take this back a minute. The informative messages do information as well as debug, yeah. So make yourself another class. Small change, but that's why I'm getting confused. So we want log level, as in just a log level of, okay, what did I make there? A XAML file. Try that again. In fact, let's just copy the LogFactory level. Rename the class to log level. Change this to log level. Probably rename the LogFactory level to Control-R log output level. The output details, or the level of details to output for a logger. And then the log level is the severity of the log message. So that's now the right message there. So when you're logging a message, you want to do the log level, as in what level, what is this message? Is it debug, verbose, informative? And then you won't have normal here. You'd have, what would you have? Informative. You could have a warning. A warning. You'd have to change all these descriptions. General information. Verbose information. Developer specific information. Then you'd have a warning. Error success. An error. Success. Then you could have critical, to be honest, is, I'd say critical is any of these three. These are critical pieces of information. A successful message, an error message, or a warning. So I'd class them as critical. And then nothing, you can't have nothing, because that's a specific thing for logging. So now what we want to do is match this log level to the LogFactory level. So now if you want to output debug info, you output everything that's higher than 1 or higher than equal to 1, so that's everything. You want to output verbose, then everything below there. You want to output informative, it's everything below there, which still works. And now when you want to output normal, I would say normal is still a duplicate here, so let's get rid of that. You want to output critical messages only now. So now you want to output errors, warnings, general info. You don't want to output general info. Oh yeah, no general info. So basically critical, errors and warnings, and success. But no there. So now you want it to be anything from 4, 5, or 6. So basically 4 is where you want there. So now if we do a check that critical is basically from this point down, that'll work. And then nothing, now we need to change to 0, not 1, because nothing can then be less than debug. So if you say output nothing, or rather, no, that is right, we want to go higher. If you want to output nothing, we have no, message that's ever that, that level. So by setting nothing to higher than it, then it'll never output anything. So then we change the log level. We need to change that in. The logger has a log level, not a log output level. The LogFactory has a new message and level. So again, log level. That's fine. Logger message there again. This is log level is the informative. Log level there. And then base factory will have it. Log level. It will have log output level's fine, which we still need to obey. We haven't actually obeyed that. The event, new log has to have it. That's done. Add logger's fine. That's done. Console logger will then finally boil down to having a log level, which is what we ultimately wanted. And then we'll finally now get back to where we were, which is to style each type of message based on color. So now we have a debug, verbose. Then we had informative, which was red, which was white, rather, which I didn't care about. Then we have warnings, errors, and success. So I'd say warning is orange. Really? There's no orange? Warning is... Okay, warning yellow. Here we go. Error is red. And success can be green. So that should now style the console any color. I'm sure I've missed something somewhere with the change in log level. Oh, I know what it was. We now have to obey the log level. So the LogFactory has been told what log level, what output level to obey. So we should obey that when we come to log a message. So this is where we say if we should not log the message as the level is too low. And then here, this is where we do the check, if the level, which bear in mind the level's a log level, and it's still an integer. So if this level, we want to output information and more detailed. So you want to check if the log level here is less than the output level, or less than, yeah, basically. So if the log level is less than the output level, return. And we might just have to explicitly do that maybe. There we go. So you're comparing an integer, and that should return. Then we can also breakpoint to check if that's the case there. So now if we were to output a bunch of messages and of different styles, so we could have a debug. This is debug. And in fact, we do that. Error, informative, success, verbose, warning. And then we put them in order. So we'd have debug, verbose, information, warning, error, success. Okay, so if we run this now, we should get hopefully some colors in the output window. which we don't. So this would definitely work in a console output because this is debug output, not a console window. We're losing color. Let's see if maybe there's a Visual Studio extension. I think I remember one. Whether it'll still work or even exist still. VS, what's it called? VS Code or VS Console? I think it's like VS Console colors or something. Ah, there we go, VS. I think that was it. I'm sure I just spotted VS Color or something. VS Color output. I think this is the one. Outputs for build and debug window. VS Color output. Got to restart, so let's restart. And then hopefully this will give us some nice colored output to the debug window. And then obviously you can also do whatever you like, but I thought it'd be nice to just have colored output instead of, text writing, whether it's important or not. It's much quicker to see if the text is bright red, it's, something's gone wrong. It's the standard you expect, whereas the built-in debug output, we're not getting any of that. So let's just see now if this gets us what we want. Hopefully it will. So using the VS Color, it's called VS Color Output extension, you'll notice you have these colors, which we can make use of, and you've got regex patterns, but by default they install with these. So I'm going to keep it so that anyone installing this extension gets the benefits of our debug logger without having to mess with them. So basically we made use of these colors, and the source code is so we made use of these colors. Basically the source code to the actual VS Color output, if you look in the tests and then output classifier tests, you'll see that these are basically the prefixes they're looking for to color them based on these classifications. So, the build message is called build head, and that's been defined by starting with that or that. The build text, the error, the warning, the info, all these are defined here. By default, doing a debug.writeLine with a category, all that does is outputs the category name with a colon and a space. So that's why you get, if we type warning as a category, we get warning colon the message. So then this detects that and simply sets it to the warn class anyway in the first place. So all I've done is use that source code and then tweaked the categories to match. So the debug I've set to information so that it sets it to the info header based on information, like that. And that'll turn it blue, which is kind of what we want. Verbose and warning, or rather verbose and normal, are, this, which I don't really care about. So we set to nothing, if you will. And this one simply never gets detected as anything here, so it stays normal. So they stay grey. The warning will go now to the warning colour. The error will go to the error colour. And the success, we use this one here to get the build head. You could use any of that, because this is built into this, the VS extension in the first place. But as I mentioned, I wanted it to stay standard. So when people just install the VS extension, our debug logger will now get color. So now when we build and run these, you'll see in our output, we now have the debug, which is dark blue, which is fine because it's not important information anyway. And I'm on a dark theme, and you can always highlight. So you got the blue for that, the verbose are both these bits of info, and then you got the warning, the error, and the success. And that gives us then these coloured outputs, which is the only thing I wouldn't really want is this bit here, the category when we don't want one. So the one thing I might change here is the debug logger, maybe set it to if string.is null or empty, category, do one thing, else write the other. In fact, I can probably fix that without doing any of that by just making that null. I'm guessing then it wouldn't write it anyway. Guessing the internal check will have that built in. So let's try that. And then that's it. You've got a debug logger, which by default, the debug, there we go. The default debugger has no color. So this extension adds color. So you're not losing anything by, not installing the extension. But then if people do decide to install that extension, they get the benefits of color in our code. The console logger will give you color because we're setting the color up. So we're in control of that. And like I say, you're free then to add a file debugger and anything else that you want to these debuggers. So the next one we'll do now is log into file. So hopefully this was useful. I know it's been a bit of a roundabout near the end, but we figured stuff out and now it's usable.